well. And if at any point you have any questions or there's things you wish to discuss, feel free to go and bring them up. But before I do that, I still want to find out people's names again, because I just don't want to be pointing at people. I want to know people's names when I ask them. So what's your name again?
徐南浩.
Su. Oh, Xu Nanhao.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Sure. Inga. Okay. We're going to spend a lot of time talking. We're doing transitional justice. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about justice and different concepts of it. But before we get into that, I think it's worthwhile sort of understanding what it is we mean by the concept of transition, I suppose. So, Levin, what does it mean for you?
When a state in a time of like crisis or there's been some kind of mass like crime and violence, is trying to work out how to get from that place where a crime committed or the government's fell to a new era, a new wave. So it's like the time in between when you transition, like you're changing the process or one old.
Okay, I like the way you said a time between. That's kind of what we mean by transition. This awkward sort of liminal phase in between sort of two things that are happening. There's quite a few things you said there. We'll try and unpack them. What does it mean for you, Callum? Transition.
Transition. Well, it means basically one phase from one phase to another.
Yeah. But what phases in between what? Between what and what though?
Well, phases between government suppressive or government acts which can be considered criminal or against the nature, against the nationals. So the international law would intervene and say, look, this needs sorting out. The ICJ will come in, or UN will come in and say, we need to set up a truth commission so you can reconcile between the government and the affected people.
Okay, well, we go back. I mean, you say there that like international law starts to intervene, but in most cases when we're talking about transition, it's usually a purely domestic process. I mean, most of the time, things that we're looking at, we look at transitions from war to peace, or from periods of authoritarianism to maybe democracy or a more liberal regime. They're often more internal. Like sometimes the international community does have a role, and international laws, we'll go on to discover, is one of the things that can help mediate or speed up the transition between the two. But in and of itself, an awful lot of these of things we understand to be transitions don't necessarily need to be stimulated by international law. It becomes relevant at a slightly later point, but they're often very internal or domestic processes. Any transitions that have happened in the last year or two that people are aware of? Or any instances from the news? Or?
There's a failed transition in Syria.
Okay, say failed, go on.
Well, basically, Assad and the Syrian army have regained mostly control of rebel held territories.
Okay, so and you say failed because the Assad government is still there, which is fine. There's been no change whatsoever in the form of government. The form of government in Syria now is the same as it was.
There has been a truth commission set up by Assad. And Assad has also conceded that he will have democratic elections.
Absolutely. We'll come. Well, okay, he has confirmed there will be democratic elections. Okay, we'll come back to the notion of the Truth Commission in a second.
Democratic elections, but he's limited his rule to 7 years. So if he's re-elected, then it's capped at 7 years.
Fair enough. So in one sense, he'll presumably still be in charge. So in one sense, the form of government is the same. Yet arguably there's a change from a condition of war to arguable peace. Syria, of course, isn't fully at war, but there is an open question whether we consider Syria to be a transitional state, in the sense that its form of government and its rulership remain fundamentally the same, but many of the underlying aspects of society have changed. The degree of trust that the people repose in the government, and one can argue that the change from a position of civil war to one of sort of low-grade civil disturbance is arguably a form of transition as well. Arguably, there's still bits, of course, of Syria that are still at war. Anywhere else that people have seen recently?
I don't know the details, but that's South Sudan.
Go on. Okay, you know.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, because there's been a lot of civil war, they're divided into separate states, yes. And that's
Okay, yeah, South Sudan is still very much up in the air, but South Sudan is a place that seems to be going through periods of transition all the time. About 10 or 11 years ago, Sudan was one united country. There was a Muslim north and a Muslim sort of Arab north influenced by Arabic culture, and a primarily black south. And there was a long-range civil war there, and there was a transition to a two-state solution, if you will, where there was Sudan and South Sudan, and that arguably was one form of transition, in the sense that a whole new state was coming into being. But since then we find civil war within Sudan, and there has recently been an agreement between the parties to reform governance arrangements in South Sudan. How long it lasts for, we will see. They've had some of those before, but that's a good example. Any others?
We consider Libya in 2011.
Libya in 2011. Okay, we're going a little further back than the last year or two, but yes, Libya, absolutely. You had a long-term process of authoritarian rule under Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. He was overthrown, and there was a transition, or at least people attempted to have a transition to a new form of democratic governance. Now, as we see, that hasn't really taken place. The government is divided between East and West, and between different factions within the state. But arguably, there was a suspended transition there from authoritarianism to something resembling democracy. Tunisia might be a better example. It was under undemocratic rule of Zine Ben Ali. He was overthrown in the Arab Spring, as the best probably example of the Arab Spring, and there is now a democratically elected government in power in Tunisia that's been around for about 2 election cycles. So that's a very good example. Any others? Very recent. Sorry? Burma, Myanmar, yeah, absolutely. Again, well, kind of. I mean, there was military rule in Burma. They gave up power, and there have been elections and a government. Now, some people argue that that's a transition, in the sense you had an authoritarian rulership, and now you have democratic elections. But the government in Myanmar or Burma, I never know what to call it. I got to go with Myanmar, but I could be wrong. The army still retains a huge amount of control over domestic policy and over issues of justice. So it's not possibly a full transition to democracy, but it certainly is a very radical shift in the way the government is exercised. Any other, like in the past 12 months?
Would you say that Cuba is in a period of transition?
Arguably. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it's opening up. I mean, will you tell me, do you think it is based on?
Obviously not. It's not going to be anything really sudden or quick, or very, very slowly, especially now after Castro passed away, and assuming things speed up a little bit more.
Well, we will see. It's an open question. A lot of people expect that, but like Raúl Castro has been the leader now for nearly 10 years, I think.
Yeah. I mean, he's been the one at the forefront of it, you can call it sort of very slow liberalisation.
Yes, but economically it's opening up. Politically it hasn't opened up to any great degree yet, but the expectations, and sometimes transitions are often very dramatic things, but sometimes they're very slow-moving forms of types of reform. Next week we'll be looking at sort of Latin America, and we're going to talk about it a little bit here, but they're often instances where there was slow and gradual progression from authoritarian rule, which gradually begins to break up and turn into democracy. Spain's a good example of that. So Cuba, you might be right, you might be wrong, we don't. In 5 years' time we'll probably know if it's a good example or not. It might not be. One other example that's just worth pointing out is Colombia. There was civil war in Colombia, which appears to have been ended, and there was a peace agreement. You might remember that a referendum defeated the peace agreement, but another one was formed shortly afterwards. And Colombia is effectively a state that it's been democratic more or less for the last 50 or 60 years, but there has been a transition from a state of civil war to a state of what we might call peace within that country. So there's some interesting dilemmas in Colombia, and it's like Syria. They have to think about, well, what are they going to do in terms of accountability. So anyway, are there any questions about transition and what it is, or anyone confused or any lingering?
Could Brexit be argued as transitional?
Say that, sorry?
Could Brexit be argued as transitional since the constitutional issues?
I wouldn't say, I mean, maybe. I mean, since Britain, well, it actually depends on what your view of the European Union is. I mean, if people see it as this sort of all-controlling mechanism, then you can arguably say that Britain might be in a state of transition. Certainly not from authoritarianism or from war, so maybe it's a new type of transition. Fundamentally, the government of Britain remains the same. The Tories are still in charge. The constitutional principles haven't changed very much. The way in which power is exercised domestically may or may not change that much. So I wouldn't argue, even if it is, it's not really sort of anything like the types of transition that we see here. But there's an argument. It certainly is. Okay. Let's look at the next question. What are the main types of transitional justice? Do any of them seem fundamental, optional, or simply unwise? Let's start with the first part of the question. What are the main types of transitional justice? Darta. Same question. If I can have your attention, it'll be useful for the rest of the seminar. Thank you. Ruth, is it? Oh, you've lost your, okay.
I speak there. Criminal prosecutions.
Okay.
Truth commission. Reparation program.
Oh my God, what happened to you?
Yes.
Okay. Criminal prosecutions, truth commission. Sorry, what's the other thing you said?
Security system reform. Memorialization methods. Museums, memorials.
Okay, one of them I have no idea what you said. But as I say, there was criminal trials, truth commissions, reparations, blah blah blah, memorials, security sector reform. Okay, all of these things are typically considered, come within the remit of transitional justice. Trials are possibly the one that we're most familiar with. Reparations, truth commissions are things that we're going to look at in depth that you may not be familiar with before. There's some things like memorialisation that we'll look a little bit at when we're doing reparations. We won't get to cover them all. Some people argue that security sector reform, particularly after authoritarian states, reforming the way that the armed forces are governed or reforming their relationship with the state is a form of transitional justice as well. Some people argue it is what it is, security sector reform, and it's silly to conceive of it as a form of justice. One other one that you didn't mention, or you might have mentioned, I don't know, was purges and lustration. Did anyone come across that in the course of their reading? Lustration, purges? Any ideas? No, it mightn't have appeared there. Particularly in Eastern European countries after the Cold War, when they were transitioning from communist rule to democracy, they began to purge elements from the civil service and from the police. If you were complicit in abuses under the communist regime, you would be removed from your position. And that's still something we see every so often in transitional states. But again, we're not going to look at it in any great depth. At this early point, do any of these seem absolutely fundamental or unwise? Or Brian, which of these seem to you to be, the most important at this early stage? You might change your mind, obviously, after 10 weeks, but
yeah. I don't think that I would say any of them is particularly more important than the other. I think, for example, if you have criminal trials where they seek more of a retributive approach, it cannot be effective on its own if, for example, there is no social justice aspect such as reparations. So I think, in any case, I can't single out which one is important, but I can think that when they are applied sort of together, they can be more effective.
Okay.
In the transitional justice.
It's a good answer, a very diplomatic answer. Is it Inka? Am I saying your name correctly? Or Inka? Oh, no, you're Maria, aren't you?
Yeah.
Are you? Inga. Indra. Oh, Indra, sorry, okay, sorry. Indra, what do you think of this question? Is there any mechanism that appears really important or not so important? Or?
I didn't do everything because I just switching modules, so I just came for.
Okay.
I'm staying here, so next time I'm gonna do it.
Oh, that's all right. Okay, okay. Hopefully, I won't put you off doing the module. Fair enough. Ellen. No, sorry, Ellen. I asked you already. Apologies. Who am I going to ask? I'm still trying to figure out everyone's name. Vibha.
Yeah.
Go.
I do believe, first of all, I don't understand in what context fundamental is used here.
Fundamental is very important.
Okay, I think important, not radical.
Yes, yeah, no, it's very important. Okay, good clarification. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean here is in absolutely fundamental in the sense of being very important.
Right. I believe that though like it's a very preliminary opinion, I do believe that prosecutions are important because otherwise you do not hold those that are accountable for something, accountable for what they have done. And I do believe that's more fundamental than the rest. And fact-finding or truth-seeking, once you've found out the truth or found out something, what is the next step? Then it needs to lead to prosecution ultimately. So I believe that that's fundamental.
Okay, so you're arguing you can't imagine a meaningful form of transition that doesn't at least have some form of punishment, or once you've established some facts, there has to be some form of criminal justice afterwards. If they're not...
No, but I do agree with Brian, like it has to be a combination of the three, but I do believe that prosecutions are important.
Okay.
Because there's no meaning to it unless when you found something to be wrong, if there is no justice attributed to it.
Very good. I mean, like the point Brian makes, I think, is a perfectly reasonable one. I'll come to you in a second, but it's worth bearing in mind that until the mid-90s, the position was that effectively trials were the only thing that were really important. You know, everything else was sort of seen as ancillary or a side project or not that important at all. People took that very dogmatic position that prosecutions, they're what we're familiar with and they're the most important. Everything else might be desirable, but certainly not absolutely necessary.
Yeah, just on that point, criminal prosecutions and punishing people for certain actions that people have taken is all sort of well and good, but what has to follow from that sort of necessarily in order to provide any sort of justice is a systemic analysis and why these people perform certain actions and why they do what they do, and what has to follow from that is sort of a systemic reform, security reform, things like that, in order to surely to qualify any sort of justice.
Absolutely. You say that now, that wasn't immediately apparent to people when they were going in the early 80s and the early 90s. That sounds perfectly reasonable, but people weren't actually saying that 20 or 25 years ago. It's something that I suppose has become apparent over time. But if you look at debates on Rwanda, Yugoslavia, things like that in the mid-90s, everyone thought that criminal prosecutions, for example, in and of itself would have an almost magical effect on society.
I just want to mention that for me one of the most important ones is reference, as without proper reference during the transition as like time. For example, I don't know if it's a good example, but Poland in the 89, I don't know if it was like I think it was like a transition.
Well, of course, it certainly was.
It was a change of the government.
Authoritarianism.
Absolutely. Yes, and it was a big thing. It was a new government, then constitution years later, and then like a new democratic first proper constitution that reminded of the Western country ones. During this time, there was so many reforms, everything changed, the old law was like thrown away, the new law came into force. It was a big reform, and this reform kind of led the transition period to actually work, actually be like important.
Okay, so you're talking about these are reforms in terms of everything, in terms of government, in terms of the economy, in terms of the civil service. Absolutely. I mean, and it's important to bear in mind that we're talking about transitional justice, but so many other things are going on in society at the time. We're concentrating on quite a narrow bunch of them. Again, if you go back to the example of Poland, this whole concept started with Poland and with Latin America. It was around the time of the post-communist transitions that people began to comprehend that something very, very different and very, very new is happening. So transitional justice is just one small element of everything that's going on. We don't really have the space to look at everything, but as you say, there are an enormous number of changes going on in society. We're just looking as lawyers in a law school at one fairly narrow group of them, which are quite right. These are oftentimes a fundamental constitutional change, fundamental economic change, fundamental change in how citizens view each other. There's an awful lot else going on, as you say. We won't really be considering all reforms as a whole. Jess, I saw your hand up, and I saw a hand to the back. Maria.
I don't think it's possible to say which one's like the most important, or even which ones are the most like fundamental. Because if you take, for example, criminal prosecutions, depends on the situation at hand, and there's a conflict in which you're discussing. Because criminal prosecution, if you've got a country or a conflict where the majority of citizens are involved on one side or the other, and then you have a criminal prosecution, what do? Do you just, do you lock up everybody? You can't do that. It would be incredibly negative towards forming peace, and it just wouldn't be productive at all. But at the same time, in other situations, it seems that you only really prosecute like the main contenders of it, so like the leaders or whatever. But I don't know whether or not that actually satisfies a lot of people on the grassroots level or whatever, because if your neighbour was the one who snitched to you to the authoritarian government, and then they took your husband or brother away or something, you want justice from them, but it's unlikely that they'll be prosecuted in that way. So I don't really know if it's possible to say this one's more important or more fundamental.
Okay, you're right, and you do bring up the whole issue of coverage. You need certain mechanisms will affect, if you do trials, they'll affect 20 or 30, 40 people that are prosecuted, but again, they don't touch people who are very low down, people we consider small fish and things like that. So there's a question, do you need other mechanisms that possibly engage or touch more people? Maria?
I was going to say something in the same line. Like from the reading, I saw that it will depend on every nation, like what the society needs, in order to determine what is important and what is not that important. So we cannot say, like, for example, prosecutions are going to be more important than truth commissions or something like that. It will all depend on the context and the society and the way of thinking. And then you have to focus on that area in order to fulfill on the expectations.
Okay, very good. And we look at, in this seminar, the historical evolution of transitional justice, but part of it is that whole process of ultimately starting out with a very narrow idea of what was necessary and gradually coming to understand that more and more things were necessary. It's interesting that both Maria and Jess have spoken in terms of desirability and what society wants or needs. We need to bear in mind as well that sometimes it's not really a question of what a society wants. Sometimes there are absolute barriers of what you can do that are imposed by basically the bad guys from the old regime, and that's something we'll be looking at next week. But again, it's important not just to think of it in terms of what people want, either from the grassroots or from the top. Often it's what you're allowed to have.
I'm going to disagree with the both of them.
Good. That's what these are for. Go on.
What I do believe is that be it the Nuremberg trials, be it the Tokyo trials, as much as there are criticisms, as much as we want to say they were victors' justice and the people on the victor side who committed the same crimes weren't punished. But at the end of the day, some people were held accountable for their actions, and that's the same principle on which the International Criminal Court is based. And it's not about every single person being punished, but there are certain principles in the Rome Statute, such as command responsibility, and sometimes you cannot, seek command responsibility. So it looks to cover most of the exceptions even. So a large number of people are covered under it when it comes to criminal prosecution. And it's not always possible in a lot of cases to be able to award reparations, to be able to award any other terms of justice. So the bare minimum that can be done is criminal prosecution.
Okay, absolutely. And you find very few people to disagree with you. But two things you need to bear in mind. The first, you talk about the Rome Statute, but there are loads of countries that aren't members of the Rome Statute regime. Now, still international law should apply to them. Sorry?
Through a Security Council recommendation.
Absolutely, that's only happened twice. But again, you're right in the sense. International law governs, says that there's a clear duty to prosecute in almost all of these cases. The second thing to bear in mind is that there have been lots of countries that have never undergone criminal prosecutions. South Africa, Mozambique, Spain. There's lots of countries that have been... The United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, and many other places, the Iraq War, absolutely, or all the crimes of colonialism. Yeah, criminal prosecution is still more the exception than the rule. So, you're right, you get the sense that there's a moral imperative to prosecute, but it doesn't necessarily translate into action. I was still on a second question, but anyway, yes, go on.
It might be more morally sort of reprehensible that justice is completely selective, that maybe some people are prosecuted while others aren't. Maybe that's worse than having no justice at all.
That's something people argue an awful lot. I mean, when you've got a situation of mass atrocity where there are hundreds of thousands of potential criminals, the fact that you are arbitrarily selecting some individuals or some crimes and not others, some argue that offends the whole concept of the rule of law and is as deeply morally distasteful as impunity. Now, sometimes if you have a wide-ranging prosecutorial brief that you do hit the people at the top of the tree, some of that criticism can be mitigated. But I mean, you're absolutely right. There is so much selectivity in any response to mass criminality that some people say, well, what's the point? Other people will counter, well, what's the alternative? But yeah, I mean, you raise a valid point that everyone makes in these types of situations. There's another hand, Brian, was your?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, in one of the articles it says that, for example, one form of transitional justice, such as criminal prosecutions, solely focus on the perpetrators, and that they aim to target the perpetrators solely, and then other forms, for example, such as reparations and truth commissions, solely focus on the victims, for example, because their end goal or end product is on the victims. So in a case where a transitional justice system seeks to lead towards criminal prosecutions more heavily than any other form of transitional justice, isn't there a danger that it's only going to focus on perpetrators, hence serve justice at the expense of focusing on the victims and also serving peace? So it might be possibly that because transitional justice seeks to come full circle and focus on both the victim and the perpetrators, and before and after the violations, that criminal prosecution by itself would seem inadequate.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 points there. One, and it's what we look at as well in coming weeks, is this notion that prosecutions are perpetrator-centred. Well, I mean, some people argue that victims have a very, very strong desire for criminal justice for the reasons that Viva was talking about, that there is this almost moral demand that you prosecute some people for the crimes that they do. So I mean, there is this argument that criminal prosecutions are perpetrator focused, and that their prime concern is an individual perpetrator. And reparations, they direct justice towards a victim. I'm not sure I fully buy this perpetrator victim dichotomy. Certainly victims have a very strong interest sometimes in seeing criminal accountability. But I do take your point. There is something unseemly in a way, in the way a criminal trial really only focuses on the perpetrator. And when it engages with victims, they use them in a very instrumental way. They use them as a vehicle for producing evidence, but don't really engage with their suffering to any greater extent. That's something we look at as we go through in the next couple of seminars. So I'll park it there. But it is something that we will be thinking about going forward. When did transitional justice emerge as an area of study and an area of policy? Sorry, what's your name? Anna Lucia. So when did it emerge? When did people start thinking about transitional justice as a concept or as a policy? No? Okay, again, I need people to be prepared coming in to be able to engage with questions and engage with discussions. Sorry, what's your name?
Jennifer.
Jennifer, sorry. Okay, Jennifer. Any ideas? When did we first start thinking about this? When did transitional justice emerge as a concept, or has it always been around?
As a concept, in the late 1980s.
Go on.
We started to study it in the past 20 years.
Why? What is so special about the late 1980s?
So we have a lot of transitional justice period.
Yes, but why was it a transitional justice period? Darta?
I'm not sure about the ins and outs, but in one of the articles it did speak about the need in Latin America and Eastern Europe due to high demand for these reasons to need justice. Obviously, Eastern Europe coming from there myself. There was a lot of need for transitional justice with sort of the fall of the Soviet and sort of invaded by various parties.
Yeah.
So, and also there was kind of the rise of the human rights activists as well, and that's sort of, it's like I would say a new concept, but historically we haven't cared about human rights that much.
Yep.
I think that's quite an important change.
Okay, absolutely. Actually, we might come back to the whole notion of Latvia in a second, because I actually don't know an awful lot about what was done there, but you might be able to educate me or us about it. But two things you suggest. Eastern Europe and Latin America were engaging in process of transitional justice. And you talk as well about the rise of human rights. And human rights is a concept. I mean, it's kind of been around since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that came in after the Second World War. But the whole idea of having human rights organisations like Amnesty or Human Rights Watch and things like that are much newer. Amnesty, I think, was set up in the 70s or possibly the mid-60s when the Greek colonists took over in Greece and started torturing people. Human Rights Watch came around in the 70s, I think. The idea of human rights organisations and people across the world campaigning against regimes on the basis of their human rights breaches and campaigning for them to fulfil their human rights obligations is actually quite a new one. But as Darta says, the late 1980s was one of the first times when groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and things like that really began putting pressure on governments internationally and domestically to address human rights abuses. But to go back to the whole idea of the late 1980s, what's significant about the late 1980s?
The end of the Cold War.
Okay, why is that significant?
Well, Latin America and Eastern Europe, particularly focal to the Cold War, policies on parts of the United States and the Soviet Union had sort of encouraged the particular type of governments in those parts of the world, and with the fall of the Soviet Union, sort of started coming to an end.
Absolutely. The fall of the Soviet Union, or at least towards 1989, it was clear that the whole thing was falling apart. But even in the early 80s, it became quite clear that Gorbachev and the USSR weren't going to intervene in the Western world as much as they did, which meant that in Latin America, for example, the United States began to stop imposing these very right-wing authoritarian governments that they had. In the Cold War, you had basically a process whereby the United States and the Soviet Union would basically impose client regimes or foster deeply repressive forms of government in their spheres of influence. So all over Latin America, US political administrations were lending support to very repressive regimes like Pinochet in Chile or like the generals in Argentina, basically so that they wouldn't allow communism to ever take hold in Latin America like it did in Cuba, which meant that you had these very, very repressive regimes. With the end of the Cold War, the United States began to calculate that the reputational damage it was suffering from upholding all of these states was outweighing any benefit they gained from combating an already weakened communism. In Eastern Europe, in certain places in Africa, the Soviet Union effectively stopped propping up deeply unpopular governments. So in Latin America and in Eastern Europe, you had these wave of transitions where effectively very weak authoritarian governments began to give way to their own democratizing forces. Again, the fall of the Berlin Wall is something that's fairly, that you'll all be aware of. In Latin America, there was basically a domino effect. A lot of repressive governments began to fall in places like Chile and Argentina and Paraguay and Brazil at a slightly earlier stage. So you had all of these transitions, and in all of them you had sort of fairly similar dilemmas. What are we going to do with the old guys? What are we going to do with the dictators? What are we going to do with the soldiers? What are we going to do with the people who ran the torture camps? What are we going to do with the civil servants who kept the machine running all along? So there were quite similar dilemmas, for example, in Poland, in Latvia, in Argentina, and in Chile. And people were coming together in conferences and things like that, and they began to realise that our countries are very different. Our transitions are very different. Some people were going from left-wing governments to democratic governments. Some people were going from right-wing governments to democratic governments. But they were beginning to realise that they did have some dilemmas or some policy problems that were similar, and that's kind of where we get the notion of transitional justice. Okay, how has transitional justice developed in the last 20 years? Are there distinct eras or approaches? Anyone want to handle this question? Go on, Jared.
When you go from well, in the case of authoritarian regimes like democratic, elections are probably one of the most significant kind of policies because the people never really have a say when it comes to one dictator at the top. But when you start to impose elections and stuff like that, I mean, it's kind of a massive impact. People feel like they're part of maybe the state now, and then the time of change comes in. also maybe like in Eastern Europe, like disarming and like demobilization, because like Russia used to impose a lot of their countries like Czechoslovakia with like protest like movements and stuff like that. So I guess those two kind of really have a kind of key approach to.
Okay, that's more about transition as a whole. The question is more oriented to how, and I mean, you're right in what you're saying, that was one of the key signals that transition was happening in these states. But I'm more interested in the question of transitional justice as a discipline. How has it developed? Are there key sort of stages in the evolution of transitional justice as a scholarly concept? Cal, is your hand up? Did I mention it?
No, I've got half an answer.
Go on.
There's something that was a Kimberley Times calls the TJ industry.
Okay.
There's a lot of social theorists moving in saying this is how you should think, this is how you should respond to memories of past incidents, and how you should respond in the future. So
yes.
there's different NGOs that are being developed that are inserting themselves into these transitional democracies.
Absolutely, that's a slightly later stages, but yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. But any ideas about how transitional justice? I'll go with David and then Darton. It's David, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just guessing a bit, but is it because like for the last 20 years we've had the ICC and the tribunals looking to Rwanda and Yugoslavia, and that's kind of different to what we had before.
Okay, absolutely. They are like the whole idea of a transitional justice industry, the ad hoc tribunals. Absolutely. Having a whole international apparatus to sort of respond to transitional justice is definitely an important staging post. But that's just one stage. Any Darta?
I'm not sure if we're talking about the 4 stages.
Go on. Yeah. Yes.
So there was a stage 1, which is the era of peace versus justice. I don't want to explain it because I'm
go on.
myself. I can rattle off the 4 stages.
You can rattle off the 4 stages and we'll go back to each of them individually.
Okay.
Go on.
Stage 2 was truth versus justice. Just find that place here. Stage 3, beyond truth versus justice. Most holistic approach, addressing the need for combining mechanisms won out. And then there's stage 4, which is a post-euphorious area of doubt.
Okay, this article is something that I was writing about, so absolutely feel completely free to disagree with it. But it's possible, I think, to identify like sort of 4 main areas. The first is this notion of an era of peace versus justice, and then it sort of morphed into a slightly different series of arguments of one about truth versus justice. And that then sort of morphed into a slightly different series of arguments which dealt with the concept of a sort of a post-euphoria stage where people began to ask, I suppose, more questions about transitional justice. And then we're sort of at this final stage of looking sort of beyond. And we'll go through each of these a little bit, but what do we mean by an era where there was a peace versus justice debate? Any ideas?
So the ideologist approach to it. So,
go on.
You're not looking so much at the practicality anymore, the morality, the politics, the sort of the idea behind it, as opposed to looking at how it can be executed.
Yes, well, fundamentally, at the very start, when people began to consider in Latin America and Eastern Europe, there was this question of, well, is it even possible to go and seek justice? Historically, the norm after a period of war or a period of authoritarianism was amnesty or amnesia. Historically, after a government moved from authoritarianism to democracy, or after a war, the typical response was to forget, if not to forgive, but basically to pass a load of amnesties, to allow leaders to go into exile, to just basically be quiet and not address the past at all. Spain is a very good example of that. Franco ruled in Spain from the 1930s to the 1970s. There was a gradual process of democratization, but at no point did the Spaniards ever go back and decide to have trials or a truth commission or anything like that. Standard practice was to not do anything. After wars, the general practice has been to just issue an amnesty. Most times after wars, people didn't pursue prosecutions or anything like that. Armies would go back to their barracks, rebels would generally flee the country, but usually there wasn't a very thorough process of truth or trials or anything like that. The big exception, of course, was World War II and the Nuremberg and Tokyo trials. But generally speaking, usually justice wasn't an issue, because the idea was that if you pursue justice, it could be too dangerous. If you try and prosecute people who committed wrongdoing in the past, they won't agree to hand over power to a democracy, or they won't renounce their weapons in the course of a war. And again, if you're ever trying to negotiate peace in a conflict, the general expectation was that you would promise an amnesty for any crimes committed, because otherwise people would have no reason whatsoever to give up their weapons. You're not going to give up weapons, you're not going to give up political power if you think the consequence of doing so will be to land you in prison. So at the very, very start, there was this notion of peace versus justice. Some people were saying that if you want to have peace or if you want to have democracy, there can't be any justice because it's just too dangerous and too destabilizing. Other people were arguing that if you want to have a genuine peace or a genuine democracy, there has to be justice. Because if there isn't any justice, then what does that say about the quality of the democracy or the peace that's there? How can you have a peace when torturers are running free? How can you have a democracy when people who ran detention camps are free to come and go as they please in the middle of society? So this was a general debate in the late 80s and early 90s. And in places like Latin America and even Eastern Europe, there were very few prosecutions. Very few people in Romania or Poland or Bulgaria or Paraguay or Argentina ultimately were tried because it was felt to be too destabilizing. In Argentina, when a new democratic government came in, they tried to have some prosecutions. But the army started doing these very threatening maneuvers from their barracks, and the Argentinian government realized if we pursue criminal justice, then we run a very strong risk of reversing the transition. So people, in the early days, people were having this peace versus justice debate, and at the time it looked like peace was kind of winning. This notion that if you want to secure the democracy, let sleeping dogs lie. Don't pursue accountability. And that sort of gradually changed as the 1990s went on. And we got into this era that we call peace versus or truth versus justice. There was a gradual acceptance that you had to do something to secure justice, and the question was what? A significant, I suppose, juncture in this was what David pointed out, the ad hoc tribunals for Yugoslavia and Rwanda. The international community began to assume responsibility for criminal prosecutions. After the civil conflict, or the genocide in Rwanda, and after the civil wars in the Balkans, the Security Council came together and set up tribunals to sort of take prosecution policy out of purely domestic hands. The International Criminal Court followed on after 1998. Clearly, with the establishment of these things, justice was becoming not just a possibility, but an expectation, like sort of a global standard that countries were supposed to achieve. At the same time, however, there was a parallel movement towards the whole notion of truth commissions. In 1994, South Africa established a truth commission. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at that in a few weeks. But the truth commission in South Africa built on earlier truth commissions in the likes of Chile and kind of in Argentina, there was a public inquiry. In states where there couldn't be criminal prosecutions, there was a move towards having truth commissions. And a lot of these truth commissions were quite successful. So then in the mid-90s, you had all these debates about truth versus justice, which is most important. In South Africa, for example, the people who were behind the Truth Commission, like Nelson Mandela and like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, were saying trials aren't really all that important. What's really important is truth, is accounting for history, is acknowledging responsibility. Other people, of course, were arguing that international law and morality demand that you have prosecutions. So all through the 90s, you had this debate between people. Some people arguing truth commissions were more important, some people were arguing that trials were more important. And then towards around the time of the millennium, 2000 or 2001, people began to accept that this debate is silly. This isn't a debate we should be happening. It's not a matter of truth versus justice. You should have both truth and justice. A sensible approach to transitional justice means that you have criminal accountability, that you have truth, that you have reparations, that you address things like gender as well. And that's where we get towards the whole notion of a transitional justice industry that Cal is talking about. By this point, there was 10 or 11 or 12 years of people like me or even Alex, who will meet in a couple of weeks, going into post post-conflict countries or transitional countries and applying their expertise. And there was this notion that there are a general range of approaches that countries can begin to look at. Then in the last few years, maybe the last 7 or 8 years, there's this sort of notion of beyond transitional justice, that the frames that we have looked at in the last 10 or 20 years of accountability and truth aren't enough. We need to go back to this concept that Brian was talking about and that you were talking about earlier, in terms of you need to look at more systemic change in society, that truth and criminal responsibility and even reparations could only address the surface, that they couldn't really engage with the deep-lying structural reasons why societies found themselves at war or why societies turned towards authoritarian solutions. And that's where we are now. And the lectures or the seminars that you'll do with myself and Alex are basically built on this sort of 4-part division. Next week we're going to look at the whole issue of peace versus justice. After that we're going to look at truth commissions with the implied question, is truth better than justice? And then as we go on, we're going to look at reparations, we're going to look at issues of economic justice, we're going to look at gender justice as well. So the way the lectures are organised, we'll sort of follow on in that path and looking at these 4 stages. Are there any questions on that? It's a fairly rough and crude division. But no? Okay. How are we doing for time? Not very well. Okay.
I've got one question.
Yes, I can.
It's about, actually, I think it might actually refer to an earlier question, the end of bipolarity. When we're talking about the collapse of communism, as you were saying, and then we have the end of bipolarity, that means the end of the two-party system.
Yeah, or
but
two
it's
systems.
not what the communism was doing, is that was so the move from communism to liberalism is basically, bait and switch. If it's not democracy, if it's not bipolar, it's the same thing. It's authoritarian.
Say that again, I don't fully get you.
So I'll put the quote here.
Okay.
The collapse, it's from Andrew.
Yeah.
The collapse of communism and the end of bipolarity caused the proliferation of political democratization and liberalization.
Yeah.
Consequently, transition became a central word about human rights and international relations.
Yeah.
So my problem was the transition is saying from communism to an end of bipolarity.
Yeah.
Which, as far as I can see, there's no movement at all. There's no transition.
Well, I mean, there aren't communists. I suppose what they mean by the end of bipolarity is that for 50 years, international relations was sort of in suspended animation. The United Nations or the international community could do nothing really because they were suspended between communism and Western liberal democracy. So there was very little freedom for the international community to really do anything. If it engaged in Mozambique, it would look like it was prejudicing the Soviet Union because it was sort of the external supporter of Mozambique. If it intervened in Argentina and said what the Argentinian government was doing was wrong, it would be unduly prejudicial to the United States because the United States were very supportive of the Argentinian government. With the end of the Cold War, this bipolarity disappeared in one sense. That there was greater freedom of action, and it basically meant that the liberal West had a much greater freedom, I suppose.
This bipolar is not actually internal in the country. It's about the two superpowers.
Sorry, this might be Sorry, say that again, Ken?
So the bipolarity is actually talking about the two superpowers rather than internal state.
Yeah, I mean that's the bipolarity she's talking about there. Yeah, the two superpowers effectively left all international politics in a sort of form of suspended animation until the late 80s. At that point, the West was clearly in the ascendant and the communist bloc clearly wasn't. So there was a much greater impetus to talk about things like human rights and democratization. Democratization, of course, being a staple, I suppose, of the liberal West. And the notion of human rights, well, they were very selective in terms of human rights. They were sort of what we call bodily integrity rights or voting rights. Economic human rights weren't really part of this sort of program at the time. So I suppose the idea that she's getting across here is that at the end of the Cold War, freed up, there was a greater freedom for the international community to address states that were at war or that were enduring authoritarianism But there was also that impetus really benefited the West and Western conceptions of human rights more than any other. And that's something we'll definitely be looking at again when we look at the issue of economic justice. What does Andrew mean when she says transitional justice is both backward-looking and forward-looking? Zoo, any ideas?
No. Sorry.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. Any ideas at all about what she means by forward-looking, backward-looking?
No.
No. Okay, again, there's very little point in coming to the seminars if you haven't done the reading or you're not prepared to engage, so just bear that in mind in future weeks. Anyone else with an idea that just should be backward-looking or forward-looking? I'll go first.
Backward-looking in the sense that it should answer for what's happened in the past.
Okay.
And injustice. Forward-looking in the sense that it needs to show that it has a commitment to ensure that it doesn't happen in the future.
Okay, fair enough. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Okay. Darcy, is that your understanding?
Exact words.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, I think this is perhaps one of the more straightforward questions that's there. But yeah, there's this notion that transitional justice serves this function where it's looking in two different directions. It almost always addresses things that happened in the past. So it examines past crimes that were committed, it looks at atrocities that occurred in the past. But the expectation is that by looking at events that happened in the past and discussing them and accounting for them and punishing them, you're laying the groundwork for a better future. So in that sense, it's looking in both directions. Why would addressing the past, why would a society's decision to address crimes in the past mean it would have a better future? I mean, can you assume that?
To, as you said, consequences, to not repeat the same mistakes in the future if something happens. Just like a preventive kind of measures.
Okay, so one of the arguments is absolutely is that the idea that if you deal with the past, you signal, it's quite clearly a way of sending a signal, we're not going to do this again. So there's an argument that it's a way of like inoculating yourself, almost like against the disease of violence or against repression and things like that. So that's one of the ways in which I suppose it's forward-looking. If you clearly say this conduct in the past was intolerable or it was wrong, there is an argument that you are going a long way towards ensuring that it doesn't happen again in the future. Absolutely. Anything else? Any other?
Right. I just have a question. Perhaps, this has the potential of being a silly question, but how far back...
There are no silly questions. Go on.
How far back does transitional justice seek to go when it seeks to redress what has happened in the past? Is there sort of like a definite space of time?
There isn't in a way. If you look at, like, this is people have stopped doing it now, almost. But for the last 20 or 30 years, you've seen governments in places like the Ukraine, Poland, Netherlands and France prosecuting Nazis from World War II, okay, for events that happened 40 or 50 years before. Or in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge trials. The Khmer Rouge were in power in Cambodia from 1975 to 1979, and they were all middle-aged at the time. And there's a Khmer Rouge tribunal sitting in Cambodia at the moment, trying crimes that happened 40 years ago. So that's one answer to you. People look back one generation. You see the US government apologising for slavery, for example, or the University of Georgetown has basically last year decided to give places in college to the descendants of the slaves they sold to build the campus that Georgetown is built upon. You see the United Kingdom apologising for its role in basically colonising an awful lot of countries. So arguably the whole notion of justice and apology and everything can stretch back very, very far. There's a very lively debate in the United States about reparations for slavery even now. There's this argument that the black population of the United States have been so disadvantaged by what happened 300 years ago that there should be reparations for that, even though no one obviously from around then is still alive now. So in most cases where we look at it, we're looking at things that happened a year ago, 2 years ago, or at most a generation ago. But some people will argue you need to go much further back than all of that. If there's ever a solution to Israel and Palestine, one of the issues they'll have to address is the right of return. Is there a right on the part of Palestinians who were removed from their homes during the the initial war in Israel to get their homes back. You know, that's 2 or 3 generations down the line.
So how then does that link with the first question that we asked, regarding what is a transition? And we said, you know, it's a sort of movement from one specific chain of events to another. But in that context, we spoke about it as sort of an immediate transition, and some people have talked about sort of non-transitional or transitional justice. So how does that tie with the first question, where it was more of an immediate occurrence as opposed to a generational occurrence right now?
Okay, that's a very good question. One of the things that we'll discover as we go through the seminars is that the language of transitional justice is becoming very popular, fashionable, trendy sort of language. That's one of the reasons why we're doing a master's in it. I mean, it's one of those notions. As I said, when I started in 1989 or 90, it's in loads of universities, it's got loads of journals, you see it being referred to all the time, it's in all peace agreements. So very quickly it became a very popular sort of language in which to explore not just transition, but sort of all issues of past wrongdoing. So some people would argue that transitional justice no longer needs a transition in one sense, that it has become a good way of looking at all past wrongdoing, and that you no longer need a concrete link to an actual process of a change between between authoritarianism and democracy, or between war and peace. Like many things, I suppose the language has become so popular. It's something that people want reparations in the United States, or apologies for British colonialism, have sort of latched onto. And good luck to them. I mean, they're fighting for good things. But sometimes, perhaps the language is becoming very stretched. That's one of the things we look at as well as we go on. But does that answer your question?
Doesn't the fact that these countries that went through an immediate transition, the fact that they still have these problems, are combating it on a daily basis, still make it a process of transition that's not complete?
That's the other argument that people make. The argument is that even if you have truth or criminal justice or something for a select group of perpetrators, that's a very superficial response to very deep-seated problems that are engaged, that societies are suffering. Some people argue that transition never ends, that as long as there are imperfections in society, it's still in a process of transition. Which, of course, is a perfectly reasonable argument, but it's sort of suggesting that the language itself is getting very, very stretched. When I first started studying transitional justice, it was 12 or 13 years ago when I was doing my undergrad. Transition meant two things. It meant a transition from war to peace, or a transition from authoritarianism to democracy. That's not really the case with you lot. I'm going to start off by teaching it like that, and by the end, I think you have, so you are already, you'll have realised that it's not quite that straightforward. But I think if people were starting to do transitional justice now, they'd have come up with a different concept for it, or a different name, because the word transition makes sense in some situations, but it doesn't in others anymore. But we'll start off by teaching it and discussing it in the classic way, and as we move forward, you know, we sort of move away from it. It could be an essay question at the end of the year.
It shows how the try justice, doesn't it?
Yeah, no one's ever abbreviated to that, I think. We still use TJ. Now, open question. It's 2 o'clock. Do people want a 5 or 10 minute break, or will we just keep going through? 2 hours is a long time to keep concentrating. I leave it entirely open to you. Do you want a break? Do people want a cigarette? Or a quick break? Or will we just power through?
Some of us stall the time because we're at 3 o'clock the next time.
You're on at 3 o'clock. Okay, if you're on at 3, if there are people on at 3 o'clock, we'll finish up at 10 to so, and we'll just power through. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. Okay. Let's start off with the notion of, we're going to look at retributive approaches in greater detail in the next couple of seminars. But there's a question here. Trials such as Nuremberg or the ad hoc tribunals for Rwanda and Yugoslavia. And again, some of you have done international criminal law. Have people done international criminal law before? In an earlier semester? Yeah. Okay, some of you have. You're at a slight advantage with this question relative to other people, I suppose. But trials such as Nuremberg or the ad hoc tribunals for Rwanda or Yugoslavia are probably the most famous examples of transitional justice. What advantages and disadvantages do legal or retributive approaches have to transition? So, what advantages do trials have? Why are trials a good idea? Say what?
They punish
They punish the offender. Yes, absolutely. It's one of those, it does what it says on the tin type answers, but you're absolutely right. It punishes the offender. That's one of the primary reasons why you undertake trials. There is this moral intuition that you should always punish people who have broken the law. That applies to stealing things from a shop. It should apply to torture or mass murder.
Kind of like a total injustice that justice in general, without trials. So it would be like a question of all the Nazis should like go free with no trial at all. There are not like all of them were sentenced, and probably not all of them were sentenced and they got for what they've done, but despite the fact that it wasn't really like idealistic trial, it still was enforcing justice, which is important.
Okay, so you talk about it in almost symbolic terms. It's important to punish people. Firstly, because it shows that law is actually working. Every time someone gets criminally punished, it does show that the courts are functional. That in and of itself is symbolically important. It punishes things that weren't punished before. It sort of suggests that the rule of law is returning. So okay, you have just this sheer retributive desire to punish the offender. You have the symbol that the rule of law is working, or that the courts are working again. Any other reason why trials are
I identify three advantages. And the first one is that they help to the definition of crimes against humanity, and also the law of they help to develop the law of non-armed conflicts in non-international.
Okay.
And the issue of command responsibility. Also, they help to establish that the heads of the states were no longer immune from prosecutions. And lastly, they helped for the creation of the International Criminal Code.
Okay, so there's quite a few things here. Okay, so trials in and of themselves are important because they outline standards of conduct. As you say, the Nuremberg trials, for example, established the concept of crimes against humanity. They also give expression or effect to some of the laws of international armed conflict and non-international armed conflict. So criminal trials in and of themselves are important in establishing the validity of norms. They show that certain norms are they were in existence, they may not have been enforced, but they are being now. It's quite like the point that was made at the back of the room. The other thing is things like command responsibility and things like that. The law can begin to enunciate new principles of responsibility. For those of you who aren't aware, command responsibility basically says that even if a criminal offence is committed by an individual soldier, ultimate criminal responsibility will lie with the military commander that told them to do it, and ultimately responsibility should lie with the political leaders who empowered the commanders to go and do it. But criminal trial is very good in establishing the bounds of potential behaviour. We call this expressivism, or we call it pedagogical trial. You know, the idea that trials are there to express society's commonly held sentiments about what you can do in periods of war or not, or what you can do as a form of government or not. So that is very good. Also, again, in international trials, domestic trials have helped promote the idea of international tribunals. Alex will be talking to you quite a bit about that, so I will leave that for the moment. Okay, so you've got this expressive function, you've got this rule of law function, you've got this retributive, deeply satisfying, let's punish the bad guy justification. Any others?
Prevents like collective punishment of the whole country. I suppose after World War II you did a new approach different to World War I when you had to side.
Absolutely.
So it's an attempt to sort of individualise the
Okay, so there is this notion that one of the important functions that trials do is that they individualise guilt. They remove it from collectivities. So the war crimes trials in Yugoslavia, for example, they made it clear that it wasn't all Croats that committed these offences against you, it wasn't all Bosnian Muslims that destroyed this town, it wasn't all Serbs that engaged in ethnic cleansing. It was specific individuals doing specific acts. So there's this idea that you can remove collective guilt from people. And that's one of the main justifications for having a criminal trial. Now, some people disagree with that. Some people argue, for example, that the Holocaust was the collective product of all Germans, and that it was a mistake to individualise it. This clearly was, they were taking advantage of currents that were present in German society, or the events that occurred during the Balkan Wars were clearly an expression of a generalized Serbian hatred for Bosnian Muslims, or vice versa. So you're quite right that one of the justifications we always have is to individualize crime. That makes sense, I think, to lawyers who always see crime in terms of individual responsibility. It doesn't make as much sense to historians, for example. Historians do find the notion that you delegate responsibility, or you attribute responsibility to one person or a group of people, to be a very, very unusual or odd notion. Any other reasons why trials are pursued?
Involvement of the international community, putting human rights over domestic jurisdiction. The idea of a community of people as opposed to a sovereign state.
Okay, that is a good, at least in terms of when we're talking about international law. One thing I do want to make clear though is that an awful lot of transitional criminal trials we're talking about are purely domestic. I mean, they're not international. The ICC still doesn't actually try many cases. But there have been quite a few international criminal
examples there, you remember?
Yeah, and a lot of the most famous examples we have of international criminal trials clearly show that there are limits to what sovereign states can do, that there is more overarching international rule of law that is more important and that deserves sort of vindication or respect. So I suppose that's one of the things the criminal trials do. They do show that there's an overarching universal morality that goes beyond the dictates of sovereignty. Okay, any others? Were you going to say one, Cal?
Yeah, I was going to mention what David said about being preventative and justice is seen to be done. And then you mentioned Bosnia and genocidal crimes. It occurred to me that anyone who's likely to even think about committing genocide so far gone with yet that preventative justice doesn't even apply.
Okay, well let's talk about, you mentioned preventative justice, the whole notion of deterrence. That's a really, really important justification for having international criminal trials. In a later seminar we're going to look at whether deterrence actually makes sense or not as a concept. I strongly suspect you don't. And I don't either. I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to deterrence. One of the reasons why we have domestic trials domestically is, the reason why we punish someone for stealing a pair of sneakers from a shop is the idea that if you punish someone from stealing sneakers from a shop, other people will see him being punished and they'll desist from pursuing that course of action themselves.
What I mean is there's some crimes that are so big that, I mean, stealing the train is one thing, there's not a crime, but some kind of like genocide so big that anyone who wants to try and perpetrate them to beyond.
Well, that's one of the reasons why people say deterrence is one of the, if you look at the statute of the International Criminal Tribunal or the Rwanda or Yugoslavia, deterrence is one of the reasons why they were established. But you're quite right, I mean, it's based on domestic criminal notions of deterrence that may not make sense in a genocidal context. That's park that idea. We are definitely going to be spending time looking at that in about 3 weeks. But deterrence is another one. Another one is reconciliation. People argue you can't have reconciliation within a society without trials. Other people argue, of course, that you can't have reconciliation if you have trials because they're too embittering. What about truth commissions? Truth commissions are seen as a type of restorative justice, and we'll come to that whole notion of restorative justice. It's mentioned in the works. But oh no, let's go back. Sorry, let's go back to the disadvantages of trials. Okay, so we've gone through some of the advantages of trials. They express notions of political morality. They may have deterrent effects. They may help reconcile. They establish the rule of law. They demonstrate the ongoing salience of international human rights law. They just feel morally good. It feels morally good to punish people. What disadvantages do trials have?
Two things. Firstly, the concept of victor's justice. In both Nuremberg and Tokyo tribunals, none of the judges who were on the panel were either German or from Japan at this point, and it was so that was A, there was no representation, and B, secondly, for the same atrocities that were committed by, at this point, the victors, in this case, the US and its allies, and they weren't punished for the same crimes, whereas Germany and Japan were.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big problems people have with trials is this notion of of victor's justice. That usually trials are conducted by the people who win the war or who ultimately take power in society, and they're trying people just from the old regime or from the losing side, and that it's very one-sided. And it is, as you say, victor's justice. The main example, of course, is the Nuremberg trials. You had the United States and Britain and France putting Germans on trial for various offences, but they were never put on trial themselves. The British firebombed Dresden, the Americans used nuclear weapons and burned Tokyo to the ground, yet they were never made accountable for what they did. And we see that continuing on in many different systems. Oh yes, right.
I was thinking about legal certainty. I don't know if it applies or not, but it's like in Brazil we have a truth commission, and all of the members are from people who were victims.
Victim, okay, yeah.
So it's just one view. We don't have in this commission both views to have a balance. So and they judge everything from that view, and there is not just one view. The truth is not just is not made just from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Many people.
In that time, when things happened in Brazil, there was the law and the rules for that time. So they are going back and judge people, judge people with the view that we have nowadays. But do you understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'm thinking about legal certainty is like. I'm not sure if I'm right.
Absolutely. That's a very good example. Let's look at Brazil. Brazil, there was a period of military rule. It was in the 60s, wasn't it? And into the 70s? Am I right?
50s.
50s. Okay. Okay. So you had a sort of a right-wing government in Brazil that committed a lot of human rights abuses. There's now a Truth Commission looking at those abuses. But the Truth Commission is made up of purely of people who would have been victims or who are ideologically aligned with the government in Brazil at the moment. There's no one on this Truth Commission putting forward the view of the people who committed these acts. And a lot of them would have been people who were working for the state, who were simply following the law as it was at the time. A lot of people who were doing these acts believed that they were protecting Brazil from takeover by communism or by even worse people. Now, you can disagree with that viewpoint or you can agree with it, but there is something very troubling about having a Truth Commission that reflects only one point of view. It may be impossible to even arrive at the truth if you only have a one-sided view of things. And that's always been the danger. Not so much with Truth Commissions, but this Brazilian Truth Commission is very interesting in that regard. Trials have often been characterised by very one-sided prosecutions. I did my work on the serious crimes process in East Timor, which basically was a process that really only tried criminals who were aligned with Indonesia and didn't really prosecute any people who were aligned against Indonesia. There are some good examples like Yugoslavia and Sierra Leone. They had very wide-ranging sort of prosecutions. They tried to prosecute people from every faction in the war. But an awful lot of examples of domestic transitional justice is very one-sided. And that becomes very problematic because it is unfair, because it suggested that one side didn't commit any offences at all. One of the reasons, for example, in Colombia, why FARC, the rebel group, are not very enthusiastic about trials is because they think it'll be one-sided. It'll be the state purely prosecuting members of FARC and not prosecuting their own armed forces for doing so. So victor's justice is definitely one problem that attaches to trials. Any others?
Trials often hold defendants responsible for acts that were not illegal at the time they were.
Okay.
For example, in Germany.
Absolutely. This goes back to one of the sort of things that were discussed earlier by Maria, this notion that sometimes you'll be prosecuting people for acts that were perfectly legal under domestic law at the time. But that raises an interesting argument then, because you often have, as Maria was saying, international law as well. You know that even if domestic law says you can do something, there is an overarching international law that says you can never torture, You can never have systematically unfair trials. You can never collectively punish populations. You can't persecute people. So that's one of the interesting arguments, that if you look at transitional justice purely as a domestic thing, there can be something very unfair about prosecuting people for things that were illegal under domestic law at the time. But that raises the interesting question then of what's the role for international law. But it's a very good point, and one that is always brought up by people who are being prosecuted.
So again, one talked about before, the sort of strict victim perpetrator dichotomies.
Cool.
Ignorance of, or not ignorance, sort of doesn't address the underlying structural problems, say why Serbs have a pure hatred, or some Serbs have a hatred of Bosnians, or why the Nazis came to power, or things like nationalism and racism and other ideological concerns and where you come from, things like that simply aren't addressed.
There's something very superficial about the idea of just trying one person for using evidentiary rules when you're seeing the tip of an iceberg, but there's so much beneath it that you're not even looking at. Absolutely. That's something we'll start looking at as well as we go through the module towards the end. We're going to look at this whole notion of structural factors and the problems are only addressing the symptoms but not the causes. But that's definitely a problem that applies with greater force to trials and truth commissions, which often try to take at least a bit of a broader picture. Anything else? Maria and then Derek.
They can be very technical and they can be very distant from the victims, and also they can be very expensive. Additionally, they can get, like, as I said, very, very technical, and there's one this sentence that says, they should be focused on humanity and not legality, and that should be the guide. And also there's another thing about Latin principle that says, nullum crimen nulla pena sine lege, which means that they shouldn't be punished if there wasn't any law. And anyway, like the Nuremberg trials, they did it, but I think that it's kind of like both sides.
Well, yes, but that point was kind of brought up already. But yeah, absolutely, that is one of the major problems that is constantly reiterated about trial. Dermot?
There's the argument that they are weightless in terms of why.
Okay, this is the big overarching argument that they're fightless. Go on.
Well, the argument proposed was, well, do they have a social use? If not, like they said, they're expensive, they are removed in terms of distance.
Don't worry, I'm going to talk to you.
So, if just the argument of social usefulness of it, do they serve a purpose, or are we carrying them out for the sake of it because of morality, the county and you, or you need to have a balance.
Okay, there's three sort of main ways of looking at trials. One is that you've got a purely counting, you say a moral imperative. You have to prosecute because they committed wrong and they need to be punished. Some people have a utilitarian view that it can achieve socially beneficial things like deterrence, as Carol was suggesting, or prevention, or social pedagogy, or that symbolic function of showing the rule of law exists. Or there's a third and alternative view that they actually don't make any difference one way or the other. Perhaps related to what you were saying, that they address so much the superficial, or that they're so counterproductive that it's a worthwhile idea just not pursuing them at all. Hopefully by the end of this module you have reached an opinion on that. Let's not prejudge it. But I've had people write essays at the end of the year saying there's no point in transitional justice. It promises too much, it can't deliver. It's a perfectly valid argument to go and make. It's one hopefully that we'll tease out as we go through. Let's look at the concept of truth commissions. Again, we're going to have a dedicated seminar to it, but at the moment it's worth, I suppose, just flagging up as a possibility. So truth commissions. What advantages and disadvantages do truth commissions have? I haven't heard from you at all yet today. What's your name? Yes. Sorry. Truth commissions, what advantages do they have? What is a truth commission? I suppose the more obvious question. Okay, well look, it's one of the things, we will be spending a whole seminar on it, but they are, go on. Oh, you tell us what a truth commission is, because you were discussing it a second ago.
They choose some members
to find out what happened in that situation, and then to try to show the truth about the situation. Like in Brazil, it was the name in English. We have this period in Brazil that the military forces took the power, and then many things the population didn't know about what happened. So they tried to find out what happened and then show.
Try and reveal what
Yeah,
happened.
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So truth commissions typically usually they address a certain period of time. In South Africa, for example, they looked at the whole apartheid period from the 1940s right up to the 1990s. In Brazil, they're looking at this period of authoritarian rule in the middle of the century. In Sierra Leone, they looked at the period of the war going right up to the end.
I just wanted to ask, was there a truth commission in Guatemala?
There was a truth commission in Guatemala. Yes, it was kind of an informal. I'm always getting Guatemala and El Salvador confused. So one of them had a purely international truth commission because they wanted to make it completely objective, so they brought in 3 international figures to have a truth commission. The other country, I think this was Guatemala, they had a sort of an unofficial truth commission that was organised primarily by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church were a very progressive force in Guatemala during the period of repression. So I think Guatemala had an unofficial one, and El Salvador had an international one. And again, they looked at the period of authoritarian rule and conflict in those countries. And basically, truth commissions, we look at them in depth, as I was saying, but they basically mean that a group of people are appointed, experts often from different traditions within the country, to investigate abuses that occurred within a historical period. And the idea is that they will document and weigh up evidence and ultimately issue a report which tries to tie together the history of a period.
What is the difference between an inquiry commission and a truth commission?
The differences between them are, in a way, a truth commission now has a very distinct shape and size. It's generally called a truth commission, and you appoint a certain number of people to go and do it. And they're generally independent of the state. The state will go and appoint people to staff it and investigate things. A commission of inquiry is often a state-based inquiry.
I'm talking more about like UNHCR, like UNHRC's special rapporteurs that are appointed, or like special inquiry commissions. So what stands the difference if it's the same thing that they're looking to examine?
Well, a special rapporteur would say a special rapporteur on violence against women, for example, or a special. I don't know an awful lot about special rapporteurs, but they often have specific remits. They have a country remit, or they have a thematic remit. So if you've got a special rapporteur for, let's just say, Colombia, okay, you're asking them to inquire about human rights abuses that are there, well, he goes and creates a report on Colombia, for example. But that's something that's international. It's not really Colombian society itself coming to grips with what is done. So that's one of the differences, I suppose, that an international commission of inquiry like a rapporteur is basically a form of international fact-finding, which is very valuable. It's a very useful thing to go and do. But it is different in terms of ethos, I think, than a truth commission, which is something that either is created by that society itself, or at least it asks the international community to go and do so. And one single rapporteur would never be able to engage with the depth that a truth commission would. Truth commission, as you discovered in a few weeks, are enormous things. They end up taking years, reading tens of thousands of documents and things like that. So they do something qualitatively different and quantitatively different to a commission of inquiry. So, advantages. Any advantages with truth commissions? Disadvantages?
There's one called being morally neutral, what I disagree with.
Go on.
Well, I disagree with its complete effectiveness, because it depersonalises the situation.
We'll come back to the disadvantages in a second. I want to hear advantages first.
It's a good combination, but it was just the advantage. It's morally neutral, because it focuses on the economic aspect of it.
Sometimes, not necessarily. It may not. I mean, the economic aspect, they might. I mean, that's sort of anything they're doing, but not always. But The idea is that they're morally neutral. Most good truth commissions bring in people from different sides of the community. Again, the Brazilian example is unusual in that regard. Most of them tend to try and include Tutsis and Tutsis. Tutsis and Hutus, for example, in Burundi are supposed to be on the Truth Commission, and that is there. If they have one in Colombia, there'll be members of FARC and people representative of the government involved. So again, the idea of moral neutrality is something that Truth Commissions try to do. Any other advantage?
The Truth Commissions, they combine investigative, judicial, political, educational, therapeutic, and even spiritual functions. So they help like the nation to reveal everything, and also they help to establish an accurate record of a country's past. And
okay, that's for one. You gave me about 5, but yes, that's perfectly acceptable. Okay, let's start with the second thing that's the most important. This whole idea of historic records. I mean, that's possibly the most fundamental thing the Truth Commission does, in a sense that it is there to have some sort of independent, impartial historical record of what happened. Because particularly if you look at places like Brazil or Argentina, or places that don't have a very well-developed media, people are often genuinely unaware of what's going on in a state, and it's very easy for myths and lies to spread quite quickly. So this notion of historical documentation is a very good one. But then you talk about all these different approaches that Truth Commissions have. They have a legal function, as you say, like trials, but they have, what did you say, a theological,
yeah, so I said judicial, political, educational, therapeutic, and spiritual.
Okay, so the trials don't really have, in theory, don't have that much of a political role. They certainly don't have a therapeutic role. They don't have an educational role to the same extent. They don't have this sort of spiritual role either. People argue that Truth Commissions have this much wider remit or range of possibilities that trials or even reparations do not.
Well, just to disagree with you, I believe Goldstone was writing he was in the Truth Commission of South Africa. He was saying that there is a therapeutic element of it because it gave communities an opportunity to vent.
Yeah, I wasn't disagreeing with Maria. I think she's absolutely right, and you're right. There is this notion that Truth Commissions can talk to more people, because trials are limited by rules of evidence and things like that. Whereas a Truth Commission can potentially hear from tens of thousands of people. And this ability to actually vent, to say, this is what happened to me, is a very, very important thing for victims to be able to do, to be able to, on the one hand, say, this happened to me. It's very important. Public confession. Anyone who grew up in a Catholic country will tell you this notion of confession, I suppose, is often psychologically very important to people. What's also important is this notion of acknowledgement. Truth Commissions are generally official bodies. It's not just that you say something happened to you. The state that set up this Truth Commission also acknowledges that it's happened to you. But it says, we may not be able to repair your suffering, but we do acknowledge that it happened. We're not going to deny anymore that it did. And that's quite an important function. Anything else? Any other? What disadvantages do Truth Commissions have? And again, we will spend time going and look at them, but what?
This one.
Go on.
Under table money.
Say that again. Go on. They're push things under the table.
Yeah, money.
Go on. Go on. Elaborate.
That will negative effect for the justice, for the result.
So sometimes one of the problems with Truth Commissions, that's one of the most obvious points, is that they don't guarantee that there'll be any justice afterwards. Sometimes Truth Commissions are set up as an alternative to trials. And this is something we look at next week. Sometimes a transition is so precarious or unbalanced that trials may not be politically possible at all. But Truth Commissions have often been suggested as a sort of a second best alternative to trials. Or sometimes Truth Commissions, again, they investigate the history of what happened, and then if there's no criminal accountability afterwards, some people argue that you'd be better off without having a Truth Commission in the first place. Any other disadvantage? Just
the argument that we just legitimise the new government, they don't necessarily fully look at everything, they just sort of say, well, we've now moved forward. The means of showing how we move forward.
But is that a bad thing? I mean, isn't it? I mean, if a government has established a Truth Commission, is taking the past seriously, isn't denying that it happened, is that not something that should legitimize it?
It depends on what you consider. If you want the truth, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will always legitimize the new government. Like, for example, in Rwanda, there's arguments from certain academic scholars that in reality the numbers relating to the genocide have been not fake but skewed, and that means that not necessarily that the government is lying, but that they are embellishing the truth to make it seem that they were worse off than they were in reality. And if that's the case, then when presented with this, they're just told they're they're genocide deniers, and then they're not allowed within the country. They're not allowed to talk to anybody, and that's not necessarily that doesn't prove anything. That doesn't help establish anything, and it doesn't necessarily move towards truth. It just means nothing. It's just labeling something as a truth commission, and then it's saying, well, actually, when you find truth, whatever you want to describe as truth, it's not actually if it's against what the government in question is saying.
Okay, but Rwanda didn't have a truth commission. Rwanda had trials, but in Rwanda, the genocide is an established fact, and the government can use that. Anyone who says that it was more complicated than it was is effectively a genocide denier. You're absolutely right. That's a slightly different thing. That's a government abusing a transitional justice mechanism, and there's always that danger. But in and of itself, truth commissions, generally speaking, do have a legitimizing effect, and they probably should, unless, of course, a truth commission is being abused by the government, and that is there. That might be the risk in Brazil. If it's such a one-sided Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it may rebound. It may not do what truth commissions are supposed to do because it's so obviously one-sided. And remember, we often call them Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. The idea is that you generate truth, and that also leads to reconciliation. That may not, of course, happen.
Our ex-president was victim from the
was a victim of the previous government.
So she made the truth gone.
Oh, the previous president, Dilma Rousseff. Yeah.
The previous, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she was arrested and tortured in prison.
Yeah, she was. But she made many crimes as well.
Yeah, but if we're always seeing something inside it, I'll go with Jess.
I was going to say that actually, that it doesn't necessarily, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions don't necessarily discuss the issue from the other side. So, if you look at South Africa, for example, it didn't necessarily heavily discuss what the ANC did, or they weren't the ANC, but they didn't look at, for example, Mandela. They didn't look at the bombings that he ordered, nor did they look at, they sort of glossed over those. So they looked at all the atrocities that the apartheid government did, which is completely correct, but then they didn't look at what the other side did, and they kind of glossed over all of that in the means of going, well, they were fighting for justice, and they were fighting for something that was right, which is correct, but at the same time, all the means that they used weren't necessarily correct, and that's the same issues that you have with the Nuremberg trials. So it's all sort of the victors.
Yeah, there's something quite one-sided about the South African Truth Commission as well, which we might come across when we're looking at Truth Commissions.
Yeah, I just wanted to cancel on whether Truth Commissions can cover everything. So, for example, could you have a Truth Commission in El Salvador or Guatemala without having one in Washington at the same time?
That is one of the arguments that were made about those Truth Commissions in Latin America, that what's the point if you're not investigating the role of the Reagan government, in buttressing them, which is a reasonable argument. But and the other side of the coin is that from now on, El Salvadorians or Nicaraguans or Liberians must exist in a Liberian or El Salvador society. There's that's a perfectly reasonable argument. There's also a strong one for dealing with the relationships that a state can control. It may not. I mean, it may have more to do with getting the right and the left in Guatemala to come to some sort of agreed history the Americans are sort of external to that relationship that needs to be rebuilt, if you know what I'm saying. But people have made that argument all the time. Or Uganda, no one ever looks at the role of the international armaments industry in keeping the war going there. The ICC are just prosecuting some convenient Africans that they've come across. That's the argument that gets made there. And in one sense, it's completely correct. There's an awful lot of international complicity involved in all of these atrocities. The other side of the argument is that the most important thing is to get two communities within a society coming to some sort of modus vivendi between them, and you risk unnecessarily complicating it by bringing in the international community.
Yeah, I guess that sort of depends on how sort of much you see the influence of outside forces on the internal situation.
Some people will see, the role of the United States in particular as being of such overwhelming power. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question not to do with truth commissions.
Go on. Well, we'll move away from truth commissions anyway because we've only got about 10 minutes. Go on.
Yeah. So now in the case of Maldives, it's gone from transitioning into a democracy back into a dictatorship. So does that reverse transition kind of also account to transition?
It would. I mean, a transition from, I suppose, if an autocracy can transition into democracy, democracy, as we know, transitions into authoritarianism. What we don't really know very much about is how justice works in these types of societies, because it's actually quite unusual. Most societies either remain, since, we'll say, 1989 and 90, since we started studying this, they have more or less remained the same, or they've generally become more democratic. The idea, it's just, you're quite right, it's just not something I or a lot of people know very much about. What do societies who are democratic, who become undemocratic, do? And for that, we don't really have an awful lot of knowledge in a way. I mean, but as a concept, transition can definitely
I have a follow-up question to that. So, I think Maldives was expelled from the Commonwealth a little while ago.
Yep.
So does this process contribute to transitional justice in some
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say the Commonwealth. I mean, we generally talk about transitions as a domestic phenomenon. The fact that Maldives were booted out of the Commonwealth, which I wasn't aware of at all. I wasn't even aware of anything that was happening in the Maldives, to be perfectly honest with you, but it's a good example. I wouldn't say so. It's more about your internal form of democracy or your internal societal state. Are you a society in war or are you a society at peace? Are you a society that's internally democratic or are you a society that's internally undemocratic? I mean, the fact that, again, it's like Britain and the European Union. I would look more towards internal indicators than external ones.
But then again, transitional justice doesn't seek to benefit any regimes that go backwards towards, against anything that's...
Well, that's right, but transitional justice isn't a thing with a brain that tries to benefit people. It's a tool, like a tool that can be used by anyone. I mean, an authoritarian regime could start using trials, or it could set up a truth commission, to achieve its own ends. We talk about transitional justice as a thing, but really it's a tool that societies have the freedom to use or not use, and they can use it to certain ends or to other ends. But it's a very interesting question. We don't know. If the Maldives government starts using trials and truth commissions or reparations, for example, taking reparations from victims and giving property to the government or something like that, it would raise really interesting questions. Not ones I can answer at the moment, just because it's actually quite something that's very familiar in the last 30 years. There have been some societies that have gone from peace to war or from democracy to authoritarianism. I'm just not aware of many who've pursued transitional justice at the same time, who've undergone trials or used truth commissions or used reparations. But it might happen. Okay, the next question is quite a large one. Andrew argues that the goals of transitional justice are rather ambitious. Nothing less than transformation or regeneration of a whole society. It involves political, economic, cultural, sociological, psychological actions. It's an optimistic answer to mass violence, blah, blah, blah. So, if you look at the types of societies we're looking at, Syria, which is war-wracked, South Sudan, which is incredibly poor and has almost no state apparatus whatsoever. If you look at Burundi, you look at Kenya, you look at Nicaragua, you look at El Salvador, or East Timor. All these societies are weak, they are poor. Is the idea that transitional justice can heal a society or repair it? Is it naive? Is it foolish? Is it...
I think Syria is quite I don't say a unique situation, but I think it is quite different from the way that Christian justice normally applies, which is cases through a more traditional civil war. Syria can't be pacified. There are just too many actors at the moment. So at trial, well, who do you hold accountable? You're never going to hold US or UK or Russia accountable. So that often kind of goes out the window. I think the trial would be more, I want to say, interesting for legal scholars as opposed to having an actual real societal value for resolving anything in Syria. I think they just need sort of humanitarian aid and I think truth trial or a normal trial wouldn't do them much good, I don't think.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, Syria, as you say, it's got very unique problems, but you know, it shares many similarities with other societies as well. Very divided, very poor, lots of external interference, very little state capacity. I mean, does transitional justice promise too much? I think you got a sense in some of the writings that you would have done that people are immensely optimistic about the possibilities of trials or truth commissions to heal societies or to repair them. Is this?
I don't know, from the reading, it sort of seems to presuppose that Western democracies can't be preferable. You know? I mean, of course, it's preferable to some forms of government, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It shouldn't be an end-all of any sort of society.
Well, let's forget, I mean, that certainly was one of the early intuitions that it was trying to help people transition towards certain Western liberal democracy. But even a more general level, just the aspiration to make a society more peaceful or to improve relations between divided communities or to heal psychological harms that victims have suffered. Is that too ambitious? We will come back to that question of the democratic impetus later because it raises interesting questions about economic justice. But what about the ambition to heal people's psychological wounds, to make communities reconcile with each other, to heal a society? Is it too ambitious? Is it naive? Maria, God have you?
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's that easy to heal someone or to heal some society after that, like mass atrocities happened. So I don't think like transitional justice is like the only way. I mean, like the international community has also a role to play in this sense to support like the new state or like the new regime.
Yeah, but Dr. would say that as well, you know, like humanitarian aid and things like that.
Exactly. So I support that idea, and I don't think we have a lot of faith in transitional justice, like as a unique tool to develop like a new regime.
Okay. Again, no one's suggesting, of course, that it will solve all problems, just that it can, you know, make a significant contribution. But some people doubt that, right?
I don't think that transitional justice as a tool is ambitious at all, because in certain spaces it can be the difference between a civil war or a genocide and peaceful forms of government. And transitional justice can only be judged on what it has achieved over time. So if you go back into certain societies where transitional society was quite instrumental, for example in Kenya, after the 2007 elections and there was violence after that, and there was some forms of transitional justice that was employed. For example, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. 5 years later, when there was the next general election, there was a sense amongst the voters of sort of self-aware and the occurrences and the horrors of the past election. So there wasn't a repetition of another post-election violence because of what had been achieved for the transitional justice 5 years back. Or even in Rwanda, it can be perhaps said the reason why we haven't seen another genocide is because some of those people are healed over time. So I don't think it's really ambitious at all, just based on the fact that in certain states or spaces, it really is the difference between a civil war or a genocide or mass human rights violations.
Okay, that's the other side of the argument. Again, I'm not going to take a strong position one side or the other. It'll be for you to make up your minds as we go through. But if you look at a place like Kenya, with its Truth Commission, South Africa, which has Truth Commission, Germany after the Nuremberg trials, Sierra Leone, which tried the senior leaders from every single faction, they didn't revert back into war, or they didn't refer back into authoritarianism. Now, you can argue that transitional justice had some role to play in it, in healing wounds and reconciling people. And maybe the way you're looking at it is the best way to do it. you don't look at all the good things that flow from it afterwards. You look at the harm that may have been averted. The other side of the argument is, we don't know. Kenya might have learned lessons from the violence without a truth commission, or the government might have been able to maintain control better. Rwanda is possibly at peace because you've got quite a security-conscious, repressive government. It might have nothing whatsoever to do with transitional justice. We simply don't know these things. These aren't things that we can judge very finely. They're things we've got to look at and make very subjective assessments about.
Could we also argue that transitional justice could be a fantastic tool in cases where an oppressive government has been overthrown? I suppose going back to the example of Syria, from my understanding, Assad is kind of staying strong and it doesn't seem like he's going to be going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
So maybe a truth commission may actually spark a revival of a civil war if it was ever to diminish. Just from a point of view of, right, well, we had massive issues, we've kind of come to terms with it, everything has died down, and it comes out that there were so many more atrocities that nobody knew about. Could that potentially spark?
It could. That's why Assad would never agree to it. I mean, any truth commission in Syria, for example, would, if it's any sort of honest truth commission, will look at things that his own government did, which means he'd never agree to do it. And there'd always be a risk that it would re-inflame tensions among different communities, so he'd never agree to it. That's why transition is such an unusual. Transition is important because it's a state of sort of flux between two types of regimes. It's one of the very few opportunities that societies have. It's one of the few contexts that provide a motivation for re-examining the past. Stable societies never feel any need to re-examine the past. Oppressive societies never feel any need to examine the past. That's why transition is really important. It's a time when everything is up in the air. People are willing to readdress the past, but they always try to not do too much that so it becomes destabilizing. And that's what we're going to look at in the next seminar. Is there any questions before we go? Because I know some of you have a class. No? Okay, I'm delighted with this seminar. It was really good. I think there's slightly less reading for the next seminar. It's going to be on issues of peace and justice, or possibly truth and justice. I can't remember. But the slides will go up in about 10 minutes' time when I go back to my office. I'll see you all in a week. I'd love to see this degree of participation and engagement again. It was really fantastic. So I'll see you all in a week. Thank you very much. If any of you have got questions, feel free to come up and ask me.